Sometimes it's not the place that's haunted, it's the person. In the autumn of 1994, a woman named Mara Ellis, recently divorced and emotionally exhausted, moved into a modest cottage on the outskirts of Ashfield, Maine. Surrounded by dense woods and silence, it was supposed to be her fresh start, a safe place to raise her two children and begin healing. But from the moment they arrived, something felt wrong. Lights flickered without reason, doors creaked open despite being locked. Cold spots roamed the hallways like invisible figures passing by. At first, Mara thought it was just stress, or maybe her imagination playing tricks on her. Then her son, Caleb, started talking to someone who wasn't there, and what began as whispers in the dark quickly escalated into something much darker. Was it the house, or was something following Mara? A presence feeding on the trauma, the grief, the lingering pain of everything she was trying to leave behind. This is the story of the Ashfield haunting, a chilling true account of psychological unraveling, terrifying encounters, and one mother's desperate fight to protect her family from something she couldn't see. You might not believe in ghosts, but after hearing this story, you just might start to believe in fear. When Mara signed the lease on the Ashfield cottage, she didn't have many options. The rent was low, the landlord seemed kind, and the surrounding forest gave her a sense of isolation she thought would be therapeutic. After a year of battling a bitter custody case and barely escaping a volatile marriage, all she wanted was peace. But the house didn't want peace. In the very first week, small things began to go wrong. The kitchen light flickered erratically, always between 3 and 4 a.m. The pipes would groan at night, not with pressure or cold, but like moaning. The back door, even after she replaced the lock twice, would be found ajar nearly every morning. And Mara began to have vivid, oppressive dreams. Dreams where she was being dragged across the floor by unseen hands. Where her children cried out for help, but their mouths wouldn't open. Where a voice, low, male, full of contempt, would whisper, "You don't belong here." She tried to brush it off. New house syndrome, she told herself. Stress, fatigue, trauma residue. She filled the house with scented candles, played soft music during the day, and refused to talk about the dreams. But one afternoon, while folding laundry, she heard her son Caleb, just 5 years old, speaking softly in his bedroom, laughing, pausing, then replying as if answering questions. She peeked through the door. He was facing the corner, alone. When she asked who he was talking to, he replied simply, "The man with the broken face." After the incident with Caleb, things escalated quickly. Objects began to vanish. Her keys, her phone, the remote. Then they'd appear in strange places. The freezer, under the mattress, inside a locked cabinet. One night, she found her wedding ring, long lost during the divorce, sitting in the middle of the hallway, wet with condensation, though the heating was on full. Mara began hearing thuds in the attic, not rodents or creaks, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing above her head, always starting at exactly 2:11 a.m. She called the landlord. He insisted no one had ever reported anything unusual. Desperate, she invited a close friend, Lena, to stay the weekend. Lena was a skeptic, level-headed, and curious. On the second night, they were both awoken by the sound of furniture dragging across the living room floor. But when they rushed out, everything was perfectly in place, except for one thing. On the far wall, written in what appeared to be ash, were 3 words, "Leave her here." Lena left that morning. That night, Mara's daughter, just 3, woke up screaming, clawing at her face. She said the man had whispered in her ear, that he wanted Mara to come with him, that he was tired of waiting. Mara began sleeping with the lights on, and that's when she saw it. A reflection just behind her shoulder in the hallway mirror. Not her face, someone else's, grinning, gaunt, hollow-eyed. She turned around, no one there. Mara tried everything to regain control. Cleansing rituals, salt across thresholds, prayers she hadn't said since childhood. But the house only grew more aggressive. Her children began to change. Caleb became withdrawn, emotionally distant. He started drawing disturbing images, dark hallways, stick figures hanging from ceilings, and always a looming black shape with no face. When she asked about the drawings, he would shrug and say, He shows me what to draw. At night. One evening, Mara heard a low humming coming from the attic. A rhythm, slow and deliberate, like an old music box out of tune. She grabbed a flashlight, climbed the creaking ladder, and pushed open the hatch. It was freezing up there. She could see her breath. As she swept the beam of light across the dusty space, her heart stopped. In the far corner, something moved. At first, it looked like a shadow, but shadows don't breathe. The figure stood, tall, gaunt, twitching slightly. It turned its head, slowly. No face. Just a void where a face should be. And then it whispered, not out loud, but inside her skull. "You were never supposed to leave." Mara screamed, fell backwards off the ladder, and hit the floor hard. When she looked up, the attic hatch had slammed shut. She tried to get help. A local priest refused to visit the house after speaking with her. A medium said she sensed not one but multiple spirits, and that something in the home was anchoring them, feeding off the family's pain. "It wants to keep you broken," she said, "because that's when it's strongest." Mara started sleeping in the living room with the lights on, her children beside her. But even then, the whispers didn't stop, and neither did the dreams. Terrified and desperate, Mara contacted a small paranormal team based in Vermont. Led by a retired university parapsychologist named Eli Moran, they had a reputation for investigating cases that no one else would touch. They arrived on a snowy December evening. Eli, along with his assistant Marla and tech specialist Jay, began a series of overnight observations, setting up motion sensors, EVP recorders, thermal cameras. From the moment they entered, their equipment behaved erratically. Batteries drained, laptops crashed. The attic hatch opened by itself, twice. But it was on the third night that things turned. At 3:17 a.m., their audio recorder picked up something chilling. A voice, male, low, hoarse, repeating the same word over and over. "Ellis, Ellis, Ellis." Mara froze when she heard the playback. Ellis wasn't just her last name. It had also been her mother's maiden name. A woman who died when Mara was only a child. A woman she barely remembered and had rarely spoken of. It was as if the entity had dug into something buried so deeply, even she had forgotten. That night, Mara had another dream. She was standing in the woods behind the house, trees bending toward her like skeletal fingers. A child was crying somewhere in the darkness. She followed the sound until she reached a clearing and saw a man digging, frantically, desperately. When he noticed her, he turned. His face was blurred, broken, just like in Caleb's drawings. He pointed toward her feet, and when she looked down, there was a small hand-carved box buried in the dirt. The next morning, she went to that same spot, and there it was. Buried beneath 3 inches of frozen soil, she uncovered a wooden box wrapped in stained cloth. Inside, old letters, a locket, a faded photograph of a man wearing a wool coat and a red flannel vest. It was him. That night, Mara lit every candle in the house. She placed the box on the coffee table, along with a family Bible, her children's drawings, and the old wedding ring. She sat down, closed her eyes, and spoke into the silence. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want, but this is my family, and I am not afraid of you anymore." The house was silent. Then the wind rose outside. Windows trembled. Lights flickered. The mirror across the room cracked with a high-pitched snap, and from upstairs, a heavy thump. The attic hatch opened. Mara didn't move. The temperature dropped. Breath turned visible. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the floor, bending toward her like reaching hands. And then, a voice, that same broken voice. "She left me." Another. "You forgot me." And then dozens more, overlapping, tormented. "Where is my name? I was lost. I never left." The air pulsed with static. And then Caleb, half asleep, walked into the room, took the locket from the box and whispered, "He just wanted to be remembered." Silence. The lights stopped flickering. The room warmed. The presence was gone. Mara didn't sleep that night, but for the first time in months, the house felt empty. Not in a cold way, but peaceful. The next day, she buried the box in the woods, said a prayer, thanked whoever, whatever, had finally let go. And from that moment on, the haunting ceased. But every now and then, when the night is still and the wind rolls in off the trees, she swears she can still hear the faintest voice whisper her name. Not in anger, not in fear, but in gratitude. Not every haunting is about a ghost. Sometimes it's about grief, about memory, about things left unsaid and people left behind. For Mara Ellis, what began as a nightmare turned out to be something far more complex. The house didn't want to hurt her. It wanted her to remember, to acknowledge pain that had been buried too long, to give a name back to someone who had been forgotten, and in doing so, set both of them free. The haunting stopped when the silence was broken. And isn't that often true in life? We carry things, unspoken traumas, generational echoes, emotions we never give voice to, and when we don't confront them, they find ways to surface in our relationships, in our dreams, sometimes even in our homes. The Ashfield cottage still stands, a quiet little place on the edge of the forest. It's been sold twice since Mara moved away. Neither of the new owners have reported anything strange, but that doesn't mean the story's over, because some hauntings aren't bound to walls or attics. They live inside us, in memories, in emotions passed down, in unresolved grief. And sometimes all it takes to end a haunting is to listen, to let the forgotten speak, to face what we've tried so hard to bury, to forgive, or to simply remember. So if your house feels heavy, if your dreams carry whispers, if your child sees things you don't, maybe ask yourself, what have I left behind? And who might still be waiting to be seen?